welcome to this edition of Talking to Teachers. I'm talking to Caitlin Wingers today. She lives in Jubail, Saudi Arabia, where she teaches grade 3. I've known Caitlin for about 2 years now, and we always just have a lot of fun nerding out around teaching and learning and all the topics in between. And in this conversation, we really dig into a lot of fun themes. One of them is the gift that remote learning has given to her. But the one that I appreciated the most was near the end of this dialogue, where we got into how remote learning has helped with differentiating the learning context, if you leverage it to do so. So I hope you enjoy listening, and I hope you get a little something out of it too. Caitlin, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so excited actually to talk about writing. I have really exciting things to share with you. Start asking me questions now.
Okay, well, my first question is not about what you're doing. I want to know if you see yourself as a writer.
Ooh, good question. So up until about a year ago, my answer would probably, well, I wouldn't say this ever on a video, but like in my head, it would probably be no. I feel like I was a fake. Totally. I would tell my students like, oh, these writing skills are lifelong and I write all the time. And like my writing journal that I would model for students, I would do it on the weekend as work that I could show students, and it wouldn't ever be authentic. Last year, I started using a writer's notebook and just trying it out. And the more I used it, the more I liked it. This year, I'm like full on, like I am considering myself a poet this year. I'm like I'm in it all the way. And it's like, it's so exciting to actually not lie to students. That sounds really bad. But to be like, yeah, no, I really do this. Look at this page from my writer's notebook. Like I drew this with my kids on the weekend, and I was kind of thinking of some story ideas I could write. Like, and it's not just for show. So in my school, we're required to do a narrative, an informational, and an opinion piece. In years past, we had to do 2 of each of those genres. This year, because everything is completely different, we have so much more freedom, which I have to say, like, if my principal ever sees this, shout out Shan for giving us the freedom to be more flexible. So this year, we're really focusing on just doing one of each of those genres, because a lot of us attended Virtual Literacy Institute this summer, a lot of the people I work with. And we started a book club. This Matt Glover was one of the guys presenting in that. And so all of us who were in that kind of got together and said, hey, let's do a book study on this. And because this is all about craft and process units. So in having non-genre specific writing units. So that's where we're at. So 3 specific genre ones. And then one, I'm in a process study right now with my students. And then we'll see what happens next. So this is the other big thing that because of virtual learning, I'm kind of changing everything. Right now we're in a process unit. So it's not genre specific. Kids can write about whatever they want, any genre. They can make whatever they want. So it can be a book or a poster or a slideshow or whatever. And then they choose their audience too. But I have a menu of mini lessons, and they're chunked into each stage of the writing process. So there's like 3 mini lessons for pre-writing. And so basically, if a student says, okay, I haven't started, I need to pre-write today, they go to the menu and say, which of these 3 mini lessons am I interested in? Which one seems like a skill I want to practice? And so they choose their own mini lesson, watch it, and then do their independent work and practice that skill. And then they move through the writing process. So it's a study of the process of writing.
Right. And after they do each of the mini lessons, then they send you their work?
Nope. I conference with students. So in those conferences, that's when I'm checking up and checking in. there's a lot of trust that I'm giving to my students. But also I've never seen students more excited about writing, doing it this way. They're so like 100% into it that I feel that I don't need to check it. I don't need to say, okay, send me a picture of what you wrote today every day. Because it's just, it's too much, I think.
Did you have any nervousness in starting it that way instead of, because, there would be, I think, in some people's head, well, we need to start with some more boundaries and constraints to then move into something where they're kind of let loose.
No.
So what was your thinking around doing it that way first?
I want students to figure out who they are as writers. Figure out who they are as writers. And I want them to do that early. Telling them what to write in the beginning and telling them this is how we do writing, everyone. It's just not authentic, right? It's not, and it's not enjoyable. No. I have tried to pull small moments and personal narratives out of kids for years. And every year it's like, God, why isn't this working? Like, why aren't they excited about this? They get to tell their story, but they don't want to. They want to tell the story of like a wizard. By starting first with like, figure out who you are as a writer, and we're going to build off that. It's a shift, right? That hasn't been the way we've been doing it. But it's been, it's only been a few weeks, but it's been game changing. I'd say one of the biggest bright spots of distance learning is like, I've had the most amazing writing conferences and reading conference and all, but with my students, because it's me and that kid, and it's just us. When you're in a classroom full of kids, you're watching 18 other people, but you're trying to have this conversation, you're trying to keep your mentor text, and you're trying to be engaged here, but this kid isn't reading, or and this one's kind of goofing around, and then someone comes up and says, I don't have my pencil. It's like, come on, Jimmy, the pencils have been there all year. So I don't have a student named Jimmy. It's the focus, like the teaching I can do in that 10 minutes of focused talk is way more than like months of what I've done in the classroom. I'm trying to figure out a way they can share their writing to let others read it and give feedback. Because my students are writing with pen, they're not typing yet. They could be, but I'm trying to keep them off screens for a substantial amount of the day. So that's been a big challenge. When you're in the classroom, you can just say, okay, it's time for your partner share. Like, show your partner something you're proud on or something that you're working on today. That's a big hole. Yeah. We're using Flipgrid. Every other week they do a writing Flipgrid post. So a few weeks ago, from their writer's notebook, they read a passage, something that they were really proud of or they might want to develop. And then kids gave feedback on that in video replies. This week they're sharing like the project they're making for their writing unit. And then kids will kind of ask questions and go back to that. So Flipgrid is one way, but it's not the same as having your writer's notebook right next to someone. And as I get to know kids better as writers, and I can start pairing them up, maybe when we move into our next unit, I'll have writing partners and we can conference together. We use the units of study. So we've been following those units pretty closely for the last few years. Last year, we kind of veered off and made our own units. We stuck with the big ones, but then added in some of our own. This year, since I'm kind of just starting from scratch, I'm using those as a guide. and kind of just looking through, well, what are the teaching points in this unit that I could maybe pull from this book, Craft and Process Studies by Matt Glover. It's been really good. Ton of mentor texts. Yeah. That's another thing that came from this, a big part of my writing instruction this year is going to be, how do you find your own mentor texts, right? Like, having kids understand that we don't always invent everything from our own brains. Sometimes, I mean, a lot of the time, it's okay to look at what other published authors have done and then get some ideas from that. And then being able to do that, because always in the past, I've said, okay, here's our mentor text for the unit. We're going to keep going back and see what this author does. And I'm just feeding them these things. So having them, and it's also a lifelong skill, finding your own mentor text, finding your own mentors in general.
I still do it.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the most powerful things too when I was teaching, even like my grade 12 students, who once they realized that they didn't have to come up with everything out of their own heads, it was just like, oh my God, like I like how that person wrote that sentence. I'm going to mimic their like sentence structure and just, use my own ideas. And some of the kids just took that and flew with it. It was amazing. But they have this pressure on themselves that we've obviously given them along the way somewhere, that they have to be able to do this all on their own. It's crazy.
Right. And then the next step, which I'm also excited but scared of, is, so I have this one menu, learning menu, and I'll share it with you, for the writing process. But I'm currently working on 3 more menus, one informational, one narrative, and one opinion, that will teach genre-specific skills for each stage of the writing process. So I have 48 mini lessons I need to make. I've made 8 so far. I have a month. So when this unit finishes, then I can tell my students, okay, what are you going to write next? Here are the 3 units you have to do this year, but you can choose which one you want to do now. Like, what feels good? So, I'm really, really, really excited. I'm not only teaching writing, I'm teaching how are kids going to learn? Like, they look at the menu choices and they're, pre-writing might have finding a topic or, and drawing a sketch to think. And they'll look at those and like, oh, well, I already have my topic. I know what I'm going to write about. I still need to pre-write, so I'm going to watch the sketch one. And then if they're done with pre-writing, then they move on to the next step, right?
They're learning what helps them to brainstorm, or they're learning that they have to spend a lot of time in the pre-writing and maybe not so much somewhere else. Or some kids don't need a lot of pre-writing. They can move into the other areas more quickly. So they learn how to self-regulate their own process. Whereas in the classroom, we almost make kids go through every part of the process at the same speed, right? And so we hinder those kids who are like, I don't want to do this pre-writing anymore. They're like, over the head. Yeah. Whereas other kids need even longer. So
what you just said about moving, like how I used to move through this process okay, everyone, it's pre-writing day. We're all going to do this together. Yesterday, I started chatting with students. I had 12 one-on-one conferences. Every single student was at a different point in their writing. Every single student needed something different. I had one student who, as soon as she heard about the unit last week, she just got to work. She finished her piece. She was like, here's where I revised. Here's where I did all this stuff. And I was like, no, I have to teach you things. Like, go back. But it was like, okay, great. You've made one published piece. Now, do you want to write something else? And she's like, yeah, like she just loves writing. So it's like, okay, let's power through this process over and over again. Whereas I have this other student who's just like, I don't know what I want to write about. And it's like, okay, let's start there. And everyone on day one, really the real day one of the unit, they were all at different stages of the process. And I think that's what's keeping them engaged and motivated. And, the kids who want to go fast can go. The kids who need more help, I'm here. And then there's the kids who just are kind of trucking along. And I felt like I did really good teaching yesterday.
Well, it just reaffirms the whole idea of differentiation, right? And that every single student needs it, not just some.
Yep.
And it's also something that we can do when we go back into our classrooms, right? We can flip our classrooms. There's a teacher at my school who's doing it for math, and she loved it. Yep. And it's something that we should have those mini lessons all prepared and videoed for them to do, so that when they come into the class, it is work time and it's sharing time and it's that social construction of knowledge, and it's us helping facilitating their learning. It's not us standing at the front of the room being like, everybody, let's move on to this now. Like, yeah. No.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's so much work. It's like, yeah. I've never worked harder in my whole life, but it's the most exciting. I mean, not only are the students engaged in their work, right? But I am also like, this is so, okay, what other mini lessons am I going to need? And I'm writing down notes for myself of like, you know, it's cool.
But we have almost put constraints on ourselves in the classroom to say, no, we are going to teach to this general broad group what we think they all need and where we think is the speed and the pace, and everybody else just has to go along with it.
Right. And this would have never happened if it wasn't for virtual school. Like, I've heard about flipped classrooms. I get it. It's wonderful.
But it's a lot of work.
And it wasn't, even in March, this wasn't on my radar at all. It wasn't until this summer where I had time to like reflect, slow down, think about how is this going to work. I attended this Chapters International Virtual Literacy Institute. And from there, that day, it was like, okay, and this idea started building. And then also with the people I work with who are amazing.
And that your admin allowed the constraints of what you need to do to come on. Like, there's so many layers that went into this, but
yeah,
fun.
But it's all happening.
I can't wait till we talk again and I see where you're at and what you're doing, and hopefully you can show us some examples of what your kids produced.
Yeah, I will do. I'll get them ready.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Bye.